You are now listening to The Unwavering, the movement dedicated to educating and empowering the brave men and women who have or are still serving our great nation. What's up, everyone? This is Kevin with another episode of The Unwavering. Before we begin, as always, I'd just like to say thank you very much to all of the active duty service members, the reservists, and those veterans who have sacrificed some of their time to defend us and give us better opportunities in the future. Today, we have an exciting guest, someone that I've been connecting with via LinkedIn, and the organization that he's working with is doing some really incredible things with service members. So it was a person that I definitely wanted to highlight, connect with, and help spread some helpful information. So at this time, I'll go ahead and hand the mic over to Jack and let him introduce himself.
Thanks so much, Kevin. My name is Jack Boger. I work at Shift, which is a veteran talent marketplace connecting transitioning service members with private sector companies that are looking to hire them. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I was a ground intelligence officer, primarily served with 1-1, did my first deployment to Australia, and then my second pump over to Okinawa on the 31st MEU, and left active duty almost 2 years ago now, which is kind of crazy, in 2018.
Obviously, you being a service member yourself, when you were getting ready to separate from the Marine Corps, what were some of your greatest fears, and what programs were in place to either boost your confidence or help you gain credibility as you transitioned into the civilian sector?
So I was lucky to have a lot of mentors who had been through the transition before me that I reached out to. And the best advice that I got, and I still don't think I was preparing early enough in advance, was just to always be thinking about it. And even with, I think, the best intentions and the best planning, things are always going to go awry. And so for me, the timing was a little bit difficult for me because I ended up transitioning almost directly off my deployment. I only had 3 weeks when I got back home to EAS, or start my terminal leave. And so I sort of realized that for me, the timing got a little bit funky because I declined career designation in the Marine Corps. So that was partly why the timing got a little bit funky. And so when I was overseas, was doing my best to navigate the time difference and set up phone calls. So was waking up at weird hours, talking to folks back in California on the East Coast, just trying to get a sense of what was possible. I think this is really where Shift plays a big role in other organizations that I'll touch on, in sort of mapping the realm of the possible and helping people understand where their skill sets and experiences might translate. Obviously, with some careers, it's a little bit more direct than others, but for most folks, there's not that clear analogy from the military into the private sector. In the early days of Shift, I had been trying to work with Mike Slaw and the rest of the team. The timing just didn't really align for me to do a Skillbridge fellowship. But definitely, Skillbridge Fellowship from the DOD enables folks during their last 6 to 12 months of service to get full pay and benefits from the military to go do a fellowship program, almost like on temp to hire basis with a private sector company. So that's a really incredible opportunity. And then Breakline did some really wonderful transition seminars. I believe it's called Boots to Business classes that I thought were really helpful, and kind of helping folks think about the tactics of negotiating and networking, and really just the sort of nuts and bolts of how do you get a job, which is not something that it sounds. I'm laughing because it sounds obvious, but joining the military is not the same as getting a job in the private sector. I also have to give a shout out for sure to Stanford Ignite, which I was really fortunate to go through that program, which is a program at Stanford GSB, the business school there. A couple of years back, it initially had been an executive education program, and then they started a post 9/11 veteran specific program that was just a really phenomenal opportunity. It's about a month intensive on campus at the GSB in Palo Alto, which for anyone who hasn't been up there is just a magical, magical spot, really inspiring. It's very much focused on innovation. Went to visit a bunch of different startups in Silicon Valley and in San Francisco. You get sort of a different flavor of each of the different functions of business. So some classes on marketing, sales, operations, strategy. And then a really cool part of that as well is you're working on a real startup idea that one of your classmates has pitched. And so for me, I was working on. I got to give a shout out to my boy Luke Hutchinson and his startup Perfect Venue, which is sort of trying to create an open table for event spaces. And he actually started it when he was on active duty as an Army officer. And so we were almost in a consulting role, helping him develop and build up that idea. So definitely would recommend Stanford Ignite for anyone who's thinking about the startup world, innovation space. And then the last would be the Commit Foundation, which was started by Anne-Marie Craig and Guy Filippelli, who's the wife of a veteran and service member and an Army officer, to help transitioning service members. I went through one of their programs also in Palo Alto a couple months after I'd separated, and it was just incredible, life changing, impacted the way that I thought about career and lifestyle design, what I wanted. And what's so incredible about the Commit Foundation is you're assigned basically a life coach who works with you as you're going through your transition. It was just incredible the access and opportunities that they were able to unlock and the challenges that they provide and kind of mindset shifting. So a couple different resources that were really useful for me, and I'd really encourage other veterans who are transitioning to take advantage of.
Well, first off, thank you very much for mentioning those because I think those are a lot of programs that not many people have heard of. To be completely honest, I've never heard of Stanford Ignite or the Commit Foundation. Before I get to my next question, I was just thinking about this as you brought that up. Just briefly, from your experience with those two programs, were there certain qualifications that you had to meet? Like, did you have to come out of the military as an officer? Did it tap into your GI Bill?
I don't think that Stanford Ignite had a bachelor's degree or officer's requirement. And definitely we did have some enlisted folks in there. And you don't have to be just US military. One of my favorite classmates was a Canadian Special Forces. I don't know what his rank was, but he was a pretty salty senior enlisted guy, Marty. So you need to have a demonstrated interest in entrepreneurship and innovation, and you go through a pretty intensive application process. I'd never done a video interview before, so that was really interesting, especially doing it from Okinawa with the time difference. And then with the Commit Foundation, as far as I understand, anyone can sign up, certainly for their transition services online. They've got this really amazing library of resources they've built out. And then again, if you just apply for their various in-person seminars, people don't know about these resources. And I know for me, I've been amazed at the whole universe of resources and support that exists around vets. And so that's definitely something that we try to do at Shift. And I love what you're doing with this podcast. I think it's just part of getting the word out because there are all these benefits that veterans have certainly earned and paid for, blood, sweat, and tears, and then so many really good-hearted folks who are trying to help. The Commit Foundation in particular just does some really cool stuff. There's one program that Anne-Marie Craig has set up that was specifically for female veterans, bringing in some really amazing female leaders from the business world. They actually held that, I think, a year or so ago, and that was an annual thing down, I want to say it's in Pasadena, so down by you in SoCal. But would just really encourage folks, even if they're just exploring their transition, to start getting online and figuring out, what works for them. I know there's all kinds of support for different communities, whether it's aviation, obviously special operations has kind of its whole own universe with the Honor Foundation and really specific, branch specific support as well. So love what you're doing here and happy to get the word out because these are a lot of resources that I didn't know about. I think I heard about Ignite through the grapevine of some vets who had gone into Silicon Valley venture capital world. And it's just a phenomenal program. And then also the Commit Foundation is completely free to the point that they actually pay for your transportation and lodging. I was put up at a really lovely hotel down in Palo Alto at no cost to me. I know they were paying for people to come fly out from all over the country just through the generosity of their donors. Then the Stanford Ignite program is massively subsidized. So when I went through, and I believe it still is $2,500 for a month, and that includes lodging, that includes, I think it was 2 meals a day, and then this world-class instruction at arguably the best business school in the world. So it's been so humbling and amazing to see these organizations and people being so generous with their time and rolling out the red carpet for vets. And a big part of it is just knowing about it, applying, and showing up.
Yes, 100%. And thank you for coming on here, sharing those things. The one thing I want to get across to listeners before we get into what Shift is all about is Some of these things may sound, expensive or out of reach, but the power behind shifting your mindset when you guys invest $2,500 to go to Stanford, sit down with collegiate minds, not just from the United States, but from all over the world. When you get that kind of experience, when you build that network, your return on investment from programs like that is huge. One of the things that you mentioned earlier, boots to business, which you can take while you're active duty, is actually something I did when I was on active duty and I was stationed in Quantico. So I was in Virginia. I wanted to go to this entrepreneurial class, learn about business and entrepreneurship. And my work was like, hey, the ops tempo is really crazy right now. I said, all right, you know what? I understand that. I'm going to go ahead and put in leave. So sometimes it's going to take you sacrificing leave or take you sacrificing $2,500. But the education I got from that, the people I got to meet during that class, I mean, I learned about government contracting, I learned about startups, I learned so many different things. And the most important part was I built a network of people that are more than willing to help me. Just the same, if they were to reach out to me, I'm more than willing to share my experiences, things I've done good, things I've done bad. So when we talk about a lot of these programs, don't be too scared to ask the question. Thank you for bringing up those points. And now we'll kind of get into your organization and what you guys are doing. So, when we speak about Shift, why was it started and how does it open doors for service members?
So Mike Slaw, our founder, started Shifts back in 2015 when he was transitioning himself. He's a Navy vet who served as an EOD officer and was coming to San Francisco, was working at a startup, and really recognized that there was this huge gap in the market between all these private sector companies who valued and appreciated military service, but didn't really know how to hire or access the more than 250,000 people who leave the military every year. I actually didn't know that statistic myself until I started working at Shift, but there's this massive evergreen talent pipeline of folks who are disciplined, know how to work as a team, have people skills, are comfortable working in diverse cultural environments, very flexible, open to changing different jobs and reskilling themselves. And yet there's still this huge disconnect, right, between a lot of these companies and folks. What Mike was thinking about is what are some new ways to create these pipelines. And very much in line with our previous conversation, he heard sort of these rumors about a program called the DOD Skillbridge program, which at the time was just being rolled out, was not well publicized at all, and initially was only enabling folks to go and take vocational training within a 50-mile radius of whatever base they were stationed at. And so he worked with the DoD transition office, ultimately got them to expand their policy letter to totally open the aperture. So now any active duty military member, whether they're stationed in Germany, Hawaii, England, Quantico, they're able to go from that place to anywhere in the continental United States and do this DoD fellowship where you're still getting your BAH, you're still getting your housing allowance, you're still getting your benefits, you're still technically on active duty. You are just now able to work at a private sector company. And so it's this incredible way of bridging the gap, enabling you to prove or deny what you think you might want to do when you're getting out of the military.
That's one thing that I've really been trying to focus on is for us as veterans, we are now leaving behind that military culture. Yes, you'll always be a part of it, but you have to learn that when you get out, a lot of these corporate organizations, the civilian sector, they're not going to understand some of your experiences. You have to learn a new culture. You have to learn to translate your skills and your military terminology into something that's credible and respectable in their eyes. One of those examples I use for me coming from aviation, when I was a collateral duty inspector on CH-53s, VH-3s, and VH-60 helicopters. Everyone in the Marine Corps knows what that means. You go to a different branch, they may not know what that means. You go to the civilian sector, they definitely don't know what that means unless they're part of government contracting. So when I got out, luckily I had some people that were there to mentor and guide me, review my resume, and kind of help me change that terminology. But I discovered that me using the word collateral duty inspector really didn't hold any weight out here when I was applying for jobs. But because someone was able to break it down, they said, hey, CDI in the Marine Corps is equal to a quality assurance inspector in the civilian sector. So that right there, that simple change in terminology conveyed a little bit more about me, and it showed the employers that I was applying to, hey, you know what? He does have the experience that we're looking for. So being able to do that while you're on active duty, while you're still receiving a paycheck, whether it's a few months out, a few weeks out, or even years out from transitioning, that's going to be hugely beneficial. Another aspect of that is you, again, really have to change that mindset. And like you said, if you can start that process earlier, it's going to make your transition a lot easier, a lot less stressful, and put you into a much better position.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And for us at Shift, we really encourage the transitioning veterans we work with, ideally to sign up as soon as possible, but certainly at least a year out so we can work with you. We have a full talent strategy development team that works to help people, understand how to tell their story, how to write a resume, what jobs and opportunities might be a good fit for their skills and interests. And so I think that's just a huge thing that I want to underline again for folks who are listening is thinking about, what do you want to do? Where do you want to do it? And who do you want to do it with? Only you can answer that. And only you should answer that. And so taking the time, talking to mentors, talking to family, talking to your friends, really talking to yourself and doing a deep dive and figuring out what do you actually want to do now that for the first time in many of our lives, you're going to be able to take advantage of all the wonderful freedoms and opportunities that this country and world can provide.
Definitely some incredible opportunities out there, but it can be overwhelming. And that's why having someone in your corner, organization like Shift or the Commit Foundation mentioned earlier, having a team of people who are experienced and well versed in this transition can make a huge impact. So I'm very glad that you mentioned that. For everyone that's listening and is interested in talking to you guys at Shift, what is some criteria or prereqs that applicants must meet before being accepted?
You just have to be either on active duty or a veteran of the US. There's absolutely no cost whatsoever to veterans. It's totally free.
And they don't have to be, an E5 at minimum. They don't have to have a college degree. It's just as simple as you being a service member or a veteran.
Yep, absolutely. And we work with the full spectrum. I think what makes us a little bit unique from some other programs out there is that it's officer enlisted. We actually have usually a majority of folks in our pipeline who are enlisted. And that's something that means a lot to me in that we're creating jobs and opportunities for everyone. There's a whole galaxy of programs aimed specifically at officers, which as an officer myself was great. But for me, the most rewarding, fulfilling aspect of my service was taking care of my Marines. And so that means a lot to me that we are very much focused on the enlisted population as well and trying to figure out what are some good roles and opportunities for folks who maybe don't have a college degree but who have a lot of the skills and prerequisites. So there's an interesting and really rewarding education advocacy component that comes in working with and developing these partnerships with companies, as well as advocacy, encouragement, education for the service members as well to get them to understand, hey, this is what might be possible for you.
That's why I love what you guys are doing because, like you said, there are a lot of programs out there that are dedicated towards helping officers, especially senior level officers. And it makes sense. They put in more than their share to make a difference. So I don't knock those programs at all. But coming from the enlisted side of the house, separating as a sergeant, there's a certain pride I have in the NCO community, in the junior enlisted community. So knowing that there's organizations out there that are giving us a chance means a great deal to me. And that's why it was so important to get you on here. The people coming from the enlisted ranks, they're some of the hungriest, hardest working individuals. And unfortunately, sometimes they just don't get an opportunity. But sometimes when you give a Lance Corporal, an E3, or you give E4 or an E5 an opportunity, they excel far greater than anyone could have ever anticipated. So again, just a huge thank you to you guys for realizing that and investing your time in the enlisted community, whether that's junior enlisted, mid-level, or even senior level talent. Now, I want to ask from your experiences since the time that you've begun working there, can you kind of share maybe one or two success stories that have left an impact on you from service members who have worked with Shift?
Absolutely. So I definitely want to talk about one of the veterans that we've helped. And before I jump in there, I just wanted to give a shout out to three of my teammates who are all enlisted vets. And I just have done, and I think kind of really are the embodiment of what you were talking about. Will Tyndall, former enlisted Marine, hoorah, was swinging with the wing down at Miramar and has just been the longest tenure employee at Shift, really helped build out the business with Mike and has done a really phenomenal job. Sean Washington, who is Norman, who used GI Bill to go back to college, worked at Apple for a bit, and then came over here to Shift and just been crushing it and really building a powerful voice for vets on LinkedIn and social media. And then Patrick Hood, who was an Army grunt and then got out, went to Vassar through the Posse Foundation, which is another organization that is designed to help transitioning enlisted veterans go to some of the best colleges and universities in the United States. And they use sort of a cohort or posse model where they take a group of individuals. So I think it's usually 5 to 10 and guide them through that process. So they have that community support in an environment that often can feel pretty alien and different, going to an elite undergraduate college like Vassar, or I was looking up through a Dartmouth and they had a posse program there. I know they existed a number of other colleges and universities, and that's a huge factor in student success for underrepresented groups at these elite institutions is having that sense of community and support. So anyway, just wanted to sort of throw that out there for folks who might be listening and thinking about going back to college, because I think the GI Bill is just one of the best pieces of legislation this country's ever passed and provides just an incredible leg up to advance oneself and invest in oneself. And it's an investment in the country, in you. And so I just highly, highly recommend folks to take advantage of it. And I think those folks' stories and the person I want to talk about here in a moment, Abdullah Biati, their stories are sort of summed up in this quote that I've heard on many occasions, but it's this idea that talent is universal and opportunity is not. And I think for me, fundamentally, one of the promises of this country that I hold very near and dear is the opportunity for folks to try to make something of themselves and do better than their grandparents. I'm the great grandson of Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe. We're all immigrants for the most part in this country. And so just having that opportunity to make something of oneself and grow. And Abdullah's story is really powerful and unique. He was actually born in Iraq, moved to Damascus, Syria when he was younger with his family and got really interested in computers and worked at an internet cafe, which I imagine most folks listening will be old enough to remember having to go to internet cafes when that was a thing.
When they still had AOL.
Yeah, exactly. So he learned how to work on computers after the U.S. invasion, came back to Iraq and started working as an interpreter for the U.S. Army. And after a couple of years, he and his brother were able to take advantage of one of the interpreter programs to come back to immigrate to the U.S., get a green card. And I think Abdullah, to me, just really epitomizes what it means to have, a servant's heart, is always looking for ways to give back. And when he came to the United States, initially to San Jose, he was working with I believe it was a Catholic refugee organization as an interpreter, and then was so inspired by his experiences that he ended up joining the Army and became a paratrooper initially, and then was in North Carolina, and then stationed in Hawaii, and was really thinking strategically and long term about how he wanted to transition out of the military. And I think this is just another big piece of advice, particularly for the enlisted folks out there, is I think in a lot of cases, we would talk about it as white space, but there are these chunks of time where maybe you're standing in line or waiting for the word or whatever. And a lot of folks, it's really easy to, just take out your phone and scroll on Instagram or text or whatever. But Abdullah was constantly had his nose in different programming manuals, training programs, and actually earned a number of cybersecurity and IT certifications while he was still on active duty, and then came to Shift. And in one of our early partnerships was working with Uber. And so Abdullah was able to use a DOD Skillbridge fellowship to transition to Uber, where he's been now for, I think, coming on almost 2 years. It's certainly over a year. And I think for me, that was an account that I've been working on as well, and getting to go over to this incredible building in downtown San Francisco and have a little kombucha with Abdullah and just hear his story and just sit face to face with another human being whose life had been pretty radically transformed by what Shift had been able to create. There's just kind of this perfect storm of the power of the private sector and entrepreneurship, the ideals that at its best our country can exhibit, and just an individual's hard work and determination, it really just made my heart sing. And so I think, Abdul Al-Biati in my mind is kind of the epitome about what we're trying to do here at Shift.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. You give the right person a chance. You even open the door 1 inch. That's all they need to not only go on and excel, but not forget where they came from and in turn pay it forward. Abdullah has an amazing story and it's definitely impactful hearing you say it. I've never met him personally, but I'm like, holy crap, someone coming from that walk of life continuing to give back, serving in different ministries of faiths that may not even have been his, just because he cared about helping others. And then after that, going to the army. After the army, continuing to educate himself, pick up certificates, and then going to shift. Those are the stories that I think we need to do a better job of highlighting. Those are the people that we need to empower. And there's tons of people like that, but sometimes they get overlooked. So it's incredible to hear that you guys are advocates of that. You guys are actively seeking individuals like that who are asking for a chance. They're asking for an opportunity to do something greater. It's extremely powerful. So 100% Abdullah, thank you for telling your story to Jack, because whether or not you realize it, he is now telling that story to others, and your story will continue to have an impact well after you're gone, and you may not even know it. Just remember that, guys. If you guys are looking for opportunities, sometimes it's as easy as you reaching out and asking for help. Sometimes it's as easy as you looking at these different organizations that are veteran friendly, they're service member friendly. And oftentimes you'll find that it's fellow veterans working there that just care about giving. They don't want anything in return other than to see you succeed. So please just take heed of that and help others whenever you're in an opportunity to do so. Thank you for sharing that, Jack. Before we end today's episode, I just wanted to ask, are there any things that you guys have in the works that people can expect? Are you guys still helping veterans connect despite the pandemic? Can you kind of fill us in on those things?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're working on a number of different ways to connect with our community during this very strange time. One of which I want to highlight for sure is, so Will Tyndall, who I talked about before, has put together a series of expert talks that are kind of like fireside chats with various veterans or veteran allies and supporters in the business world and beyond. We've got a really phenomenal lineup of folks that are going to be on there. We just had our first talk this week with a gentleman who had transitioned out of the Marine Corps and now is working in a pretty interesting role at Tesla. So I'd really encourage folks to check that out, which you can access on our website, which is www.shift.org, to learn more and to sign up for our different expert talks. So to access those, you need to be in our talent pipeline. So really would encourage folks to sign up, create a profile. It's free. It's really easy. And then we're also just continuing to find different avenues, which can't talk quite about publicly yet because they're still in the works, but finding different ways to engage really with our veteran community and different government entities to try and create more opportunities and just streamline the transition process and make it a lot better. Because certainly I know, I imagine and a lot of other people who are on the other side of this thing, that transition could be a lot better for everyone involved, and being part of that work to facilitate and improve it means a lot to me.
I think you guys are doing an incredible job, as I said earlier, just helping others pursue their dreams. So I'm extremely grateful for that. And for anyone who has some slight interest in joining Shift and learning more about you, or maybe how to get started, how can they connect with you?
The first step would definitely be to sign up on our website, create a profile, which is just www.shift.org. Also, feel free to reach out to me. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. It's just LinkedIn/Jack Boger, Boger. Do I have a second here to just share something that's pretty near and dear to my heart that I think will maybe resonate with some of the folks listening?
Please do.
I think a big topic that doesn't get talked about enough in just the world at large, and especially the veterans community, is mental health. And something that I'm really interested in working on is, how do you create space for those conversations, and how do you help folks live better and more effective lives. And transition related stress is a medical diagnosis that many veterans struggle with. It can look and feel a lot like depression or anxiety. And I think something that I've reflected on is the transition, whether it's voluntary or not, is kind of a traumatic event. You're being separated from a community, a culture, an identity. I think that last piece is really central. And as folks leave, I know that for me, I did not anticipate at all some of the challenges that I would face on the mental and emotional side of things. I was very ready to get out of the Marine Corps. I really loved and was proud of my service, but I think like some folks was frustrated by a number of aspects of it, and that's why I was so eager and excited to get out. And then when I did, I didn't just lose a paycheck. I didn't just grow a beard and grow my hair out. I also lost this community, my brothers, this deep tribal connection that is sadly very lacking in much of contemporary American life. And what I would just really encourage folks to do who are leaving is to be really thoughtful and self-aware and reflective about what you're losing and how you can try to replace some of those things with positive outlets and positive coping mechanisms instead of turning to the all too common substance use and abuse, kind of masking some of the challenges that you might be facing. And so getting involved with a veteran service organization like Team Red, White, and Blue is amazing. Team Rubicon is awesome, doing disaster relief. Getting involved in some volunteer service in your neighborhood. I think something that's important to kind of name or identify is that I think the vast majority of folks who join, we did it for a reason. You did it because the core of so many veterans is this desire to serve, be part of something bigger than yourselves. And it's pretty hard in America in 2020 sometimes to feel like you're part of a community and part of something bigger than yourself. And so trying to find your tribe, hopefully folks have good friends and family and wherever they're moving to, but you are literally dislocating yourself from a deep and holistic support system that you don't really know what you got until it's gone. And the veteran suicide epidemic is real. I've lost people that I know, people that I care about, both on active duty and not. The stat you'll hear repeated a lot is 22 a day. It's probably closer to 30 just because of the stigma around the reporting of that. And I think that almost all of those deaths are preventable, whether through therapy, medication, a number of different healing modalities that are available to veterans. I think something that was really interesting and new to me, and I'd really encourage any veterans who are struggling with PTSD, particularly treatment resistant, to explore some of the MDMA trials that an organization called MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, is running with the VA, which is now in phase 3. And the treatment, sort of the cure rate for traditional SSRI antidepressants, which folks may be familiar with, is about 20 to 25%. And the treatment rate at healing really treatment resistant PTSD, very deep trauma, in this trial, it looks to be about 68%. And so these phase 3 trials, if the safety and efficacy is replicated from phase 2, which is where those numbers I just shared came from, the FDA has designated this as a breakthrough therapy. So MDMA should become available as a prescription treatment for folks who are struggling with these different challenges. And I think, Kevin, you've talked about this a lot. Just it's hard sometimes, I think, as veterans to open up and say, hey, you know what, I'm having a hard time, I'm struggling. But the reality is just about every human being on the planet has struggled at one point or another. And actually being vulnerable is the greatest kind of strength. And if you want to be the kind of person that you want for yourself, for your family, for your friends, for your community, and you're having a tough time, reach out. You can hit me up on LinkedIn, you can hit me up on Twitter. The last thing I would ever want is for someone to be in a really dark place and feel like there's no way out, because there always is. And so I don't know who needs to hear that, or if you're struggling. Hopefully, if you're on this podcast, you're thinking ahead and you're in a good spot. But mental health impacts everyone. And so I just think that it's so important. It's not talked about enough. And I really appreciate, Kevin, you providing this platform for me to share more about Shift and kind of get that message out there as well.
You're right. It's definitely still a very taboo subject. Sometimes we're just not ready to open up about it, or other times we are not advocating enough that it's okay to reach out and ask for help. So thank you for taking that moment there to talk about that. Completely unrelated to Shift and what we were discussing, but just shows the kind of human being and individual you are. So I'm glad that I had the opportunity to speak to you today. And we will be doing more episodes in the future talking about some of those taboos when it comes to experimental medications that the FDA is currently testing. The MDMA, as Jack mentioned, things like cannabis. I know very taboo and it may rub people the wrong way, but I think if there's even the slightest chance that it can help some of you, I'm more than willing to take the risk and talk to those individuals and get you guys that help because that's what you deserve. So again, Jack, just thank you so much for coming on board today. To Mr. Sean Washington for introducing us via LinkedIn. Huge thank you to you. Huge thank you to Shift and the truly powerful work that you guys are doing. I can't say enough good things about you. I hope to continue to be an advocate and spread your message.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. Really grateful to have been here.
Thanks for listening to The Unwavering. Please rate and comment on Apple Podcasts. Give us a 5-star and a great comment, and we may just read it on a future episode. Also, follow us on social platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Be sure to check back with us next week.